This quiet little leaf killed millions, bankrupted the largest empire on earth, and started 2 wars history forgot. You were never fully taught this in school. And believe it or not, you probably drank it this morning. For centuries, tea was considered sacred medicine, brewed by monks, sipped by emperors, weighed against silver in imperial treasuries. It was the drink of the gods, offered to ancestors and to guests with equal, quiet reverence. And yet, this humble leaf would one day topple 2 empires, drown a harbor in colonial rage. Picture it now, in the style of the old masters. A cracked porcelain cup, dark leaves spilling across wood. A single shaft of warm light falls through incense smoke. Beautiful, fragile, deadly. But this leaf shouldn't exist. Consider the plant itself. Camellia sinensis, one evergreen shrub, native to the misted highlands where China meets Burma. From this single species comes every true tea on earth. Green, black, white, oolong, pu-erh, and yellow.
The difference is not the plant, but the hand that plucks it and the fire that cures it.
Botanically, tea is an anomaly. It produces caffeine, a natural pesticide meant to poison hungry insects on contact. It also produces theanine, an amino acid that soothes the very nerves caffeine excites. A paradox brewing: alertness without agitation, focus without frenzy. No other common plant on earth performs this quiet trick so elegantly. For centuries, tea was medicine before it was pleasure, then ritual before commerce, then currency before breakfast. In the mountains of Tibet, bricks of compressed tea were traded like coins for horses, salt, and silver. In the courts of Kyoto, a single bowl of powdered green matcha could seal an alliance or dissolve one. In London drawing rooms, a locked caddy of black leaves outvalued the silver spoon that measured it. This is what makes tea history's strangest commodity, not a metal you mint, nor a spice you hoard.
A living leaf, plucked twice yearly, dried by weather, ruined by damp. Yet, entire civilizations gambled treasuries on it. Its origin story begins with an emperor and an accident. Travel back nearly 5,000 years to ancient China. The year, according to Chinese tradition, is 2737 before the Common Era. Emperor Shennong, the divine farmer, sits beneath a wild tree, boiling water for safety, as imperial edict demands. A breeze stirs. A few leaves drift down from the branches above. They land in the steaming pot. The water darkens. Shennong, ever curious, drinks. He tastes bitterness, then warmth, then a strange spreading clarity. Legend, of course, but legends leave fingerprints, and archaeologists have found those very fingerprints in ancient tombs. In Han Dynasty tombs, dating to the 2nd century BCE, seal jars yielded actual tea leaves, still identifiable. After 2,000 years of burial, tea was already prized enough to accompany emperors into the afterlife. By the Tang Dynasty, tea had left the physician's cabinet and entered the poet's studio, refined and revered. Buddhist monks cultivated it in monastery gardens, where its gentle stimulation kept them awake through long hours of meditation. Tea and Buddhism spread together, one leaf and one philosophy, moving from valley to valley, temple to temple. Then, in the 8th century, a scholar named Lu Yu wrote a book that would change everything for tea. He called it the Cha Jing, the classic of tea. 3 slim volumes describing plant, water, fire, vessel.
It was the first true monograph on tea in human history, elevating a peasant beverage into an enduring art form. After Lu Yu, tea was no longer just a drink, it was a discipline, a path, a study. Then tea escaped China, crossed borders and oceans, and the whole world would never be the same again. The first great migration moved by camel, along the Silk Road, merchants pressing leaves into hard, dark bricks. Easier to transport, harder to spoil, these bricks became money in the cold steppes of Central Asia. A traveler could break off a corner to pay for lodging, or a whole brick to buy a horse. For centuries along the caravan routes, tea was not a luxury, it was hard, spendable cash. Eastward, across the sea, tea crossed into Japan in the pouches of returning Buddhist monks. There it took a form that China itself had never quite imagined or dared to invent. The leaves were ground into a fine jade green powder called matcha, whisked in a bowl, sipped slowly.
Every gesture became meditation, a ceremony so precise it turned drinking tea into a spiritual discipline. The tea master Sen no Rikyu in the 16th century refined this ritual into wabi-cha, a cracked bowl, a single flower, a single guest, and through it the whole living universe revealed. On the Tibetan plateau, tea took yet another form, boiled with yak butter and salt, whisked in wooden churns. This thick warming brew fueled highland economies. Some Tibetan families drank a full 40 cups every day. Without tea, life at 15,000 feet was measurably harder. With it, monasteries and caravan routes could flourish. Now here is where the story turns west, and where the real trouble finally begins to unfold. In the early 1600s, Portuguese sailors reached Macau, carrying the first chests of Chinese tea back to Lisbon. Then came the Dutch, shipping cargoes to Amsterdam. In 1662, Catherine of Braganza married King Charles of England. In her dowry, she brought a single chest of tea. Within one generation, an entire nation was hooked. The English took to tea the way earlier centuries had taken to wine. It replaced ale at breakfast. It replaced gin in polite society, reorganizing the working day around two ceremonial poses, morning and afternoon. By 1700, Britain drank 20 million pounds of tea yearly, most smuggled to dodge the crown's taxes. But Britain had a serious problem. Only China could grow it, and China was the wealthiest empire on earth. The Qing dynasty needed no European goods: silk, porcelain, spices, medicine. 300 million consumers already at home. When European merchants arrived at the single permitted port of Canton, Chinese authorities issued one very simple instruction. If you want our tea, pay in silver, nothing else. And that single demand would soon reshape everything. So Europe paid, and paid, and paid. For nearly 2 centuries, silver bullion flowed east in staggering quantities. Spanish silver dollars, mined from Peru and Mexico, crossed the Pacific and the Indian Ocean into Chinese vaults. And British silver drained fast from London to Canton at a rate that alarmed every treasurer in Whitehall. But here's the thing. An empire cannot bleed silver forever. By the late 1700s, Britain faced a crisis. The trade deficit with China was consuming the kingdom's reserves. Something had to be sold to the Chinese. Something they would want as desperately as Britain wanted tea. But what could possibly satisfy such an appetite? The East India Company, a joint stock giant that ruled India like a private estate, went hunting for answers. Wool? Rejected. Cotton? Rejected. Clocks? Rejected. Nothing the West produced could interest the Middle Kingdom at all. Then, someone deep inside the company had an idea. And it was a very dark one indeed. In the fields of Bengal, under company supervision, farmers were forced to cultivate the opium poppy itself. The raw sap was slowly processed into cakes of dense, sticky narcotic and packed into mango wood chests. Shipped east on private vessels the company officially did not own, unloaded by corrupt officials in Canton. The drug spread inland along the rivers, into port cities, mansions, barracks, and the humble huts of peasants. Tea's true price by the early 1800s was measured in poppies, dark, sticky, and truly deadly. That silver imbalance would soon ignite a war. By the 1830s, opium addiction had become China's national catastrophe. Estimates placed Chinese users in the tens of millions. Silver, that had flowed east for centuries, now reversed course. The Qing treasury shrank. Provincial economies collapsed. Emperor Daoguang, watching his empire dissolve, appointed an official named Lin Zexu. Lin acted with astonishing decisiveness. In 1839, he reached Canton, demanding every merchant surrender every chest of opium. When they refused, he besieged their factories. When they finally surrendered the drug, he did something no European expected. He mixed 20,000 chests, 1,000 tons of opium, with salt and lime, dissolving it into the sea. He then wrote a formal letter of apology to the fish. London, believe it or not, was not amused. Parliament debated, missionaries objected, merchants demanded compensation, and the Royal Navy sailed east toward the Chinese coast. From 1839 to 1842, this became the First Opium War. Chinese war junks faced British steam-powered gunboats. Junks built for coastal patrol met warships designed to bombard fortresses. The outcome was not battle, it was demonstration. The Treaty of Nanjing, signed in 1842, forced China to open 5 ports and pay a crushing indemnity. China ceded a rocky island at the Pearl River's mouth to the British Crown. That island was Hong Kong. A second war, a decade later, pried China open still further. Historians call this the century of humiliation. And believe it or not, it began, in every meaningful sense, with a simple cup of tea. Meanwhile, another tea rebellion was brewing across the Atlantic. Rewind to December 16, 1773. Boston Harbor. A cold Massachusetts wind. 3 East India Company ships sit at anchor, their holds packed with Chinese tea. The Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver. 342 chests of premium Chinese leaf await unloading. The colonists are furious. Parliament passed the Tea Act, granting the company a monopoly and undercutting local merchants. Worse, the tea carries a small but symbolic tax, imposed without the colonists' consent by distant parliament. To pay it, they believe, is to accept that London can tax them at will, forever, without representation. That night, Sons of Liberty, disguised as Mohawk warriors, silently board the 3 anchored ships under cold moonlight. They break open the chests. Every last ounce, 46 tons of premium Chinese tea, hits the black water. By morning, the tide carries a thick green sludge along the shoreline. The British response was swift, severe. The port was closed, self-government suspended, troops quartered in Boston homes. Within 18 months, 13 colonies openly revolted. The Boston Tea Party did not cause the American Revolution by itself, but it lit the burning fuse. A leaf grown on a Chinese hillside, taxed by British Parliament, became pretext for a new nation's birth. One empire cracked open, another was already being built, half a world away, on very different terms. While Britain fought China for the right to buy tea, a quieter, more consequential operation was quietly underway. In 1848, the East India Company hired a Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune for a delicate mission. His task was industrial espionage on a botanical scale, aimed at the greatest trade secret in Asia.
Disguised as a Chinese merchant, head shaved into a queue, Fortune slipped deep into forbidden tea provinces. He collected seeds and saplings, recruited master tea makers, and smuggled China's entire industrial secret back to India. The company planted these stolen treasures across the hills of Assam and along the misty ridges of Darjeeling. Within a single generation, British India was producing tea on a scale imperial China had never once imagined. Vast plantations, industrial processing sheds, steam-powered rollers, and warehouses stretching across the humid Indian hillsides for miles. Hundreds of thousands of indentured workers labored there, many former peasants driven from their lands by ruinous famine. Their conditions on some plantations resembled bonded servitude, a quieter cruelty hidden behind every fragrant cup of tea. The tea in your grandmother's cupboard, labeled Assam or Darjeeling or Ceylon, descends directly from fortune's audacious theft.
By 1900, China's share of the world tea market had collapsed from total dominance to a fraction. British India, and soon British Ceylon, today modern Sri Lanka, now ruled the entire global trade in tea. The empire that fought wars to buy tea from China had ended up growing it entirely themselves, on land also taken by force, worked by subjugated peoples. A vast empire built entirely on stolen leaves. Yet the leaves' conquest was only beginning. Today, tea is Earth's second most consumed beverage, exceeded only by water. Every year, humanity brews 6 million tons, enough to fill 2,000 Olympic swimming pools with tea alone. It flows through nearly every country on Earth, in more variations than any other food or drink. The great tea nations have shifted again. China has returned to dominance in production, and India remains a giant. But new powers rose. Kenya's equatorial plantations yield tea so bright and brisk, it dominates the tea bag market worldwide.
Sri Lanka's high-grown Ceylon still commands a premium. Turkish citizens drink more tea per person than almost anyone. Argentina, quietly one of Earth's largest exporters, sends most of its harvest into iced tea in North American supermarkets. The leaf itself keeps shape-shifting. In 1980s, Taichung, a shopkeeper, dropped tapioca pearls into sweetened iced tea. Bubble tea was born. Within a generation, it became a billion-dollar phenomenon with shops on every continent. In Japan, matcha, once the preserve of monks, is now whisked into lattes and ice cream. It's dusted onto croissants in Parisian bakeries. In American convenience stores, bottled iced tea outsells many soft drinks. In every form, the same evergreen leaf, the same Camellia sinensis, quietly conquers the world all over again. The cup in your kitchen carries empires. Every quiet sip you take echoes centuries of blood and conquest. Consider what this humble leaf actually built. It built the fortunes of Amsterdam and London beyond measure. It built the docks of Boston into a revolutionary furnace, sparking rebellion that would ignite a new nation. It built the hill stations of Darjeeling and the vast plantation lines of Assam across colonial India. It built the porcelain trade because Europeans desperately needed cups fine enough to drink this precious brew from. It built the sugar trade because they needed sweetness to soften tea's bitter bite for delicate European palates. It built shipping itself. Clipper ships raced from Canton to London faster than rivals to deliver fresh tea. It even built our schedules. The very rhythm of the modern working day was a British industrial invention. The morning break, the afternoon pause, designed around tea, served to workers in factories and busy offices. The idea you deserve 15 minutes of pause mid-labor, sanctioned by the boss, was born partly out of tea. Little did those first Buddhist monks know, sipping bitter brew in mountain silence to stay awake through prayer, that the leaf they cultivated would one day set the working clock on the planet. A leaf became a currency. A currency became a habit. A habit became a deep, unshakable addiction. An addiction became a trade. A trade became a war. A war became an empire spanning oceans. The empire at last became a memory, leaving only the quiet, familiar ritual you performed this morning. For centuries, tea was called the drink of the gods, but more accurately, it was the drink of empires. It reshaped diets across 3 continents. It rewrote the diplomatic maps of Asia and bankrupted royal treasuries. It built entirely new empires from the ashes of old ones, all through small, dark, unassuming leaves. Within those leaves lay the fates of Chinese emperors, Boston patriots, Bengali farmers, Scottish botanists, and housewives. All of them bound together by one plant, one shared habit, and one simple, steaming, extraordinary cup. The next time you steep a bag, whisk a bowl of matcha or open iced tea, pause. What you are holding is not just a beverage, it is a fragment of human history itself. It is the longest, strangest, bloodiest trade story ever told, wrapped inside one small, unremarkable, steeping leaf. This is a leaf that broke one empire in two and helped forge two more from the wreckage. But one commodity would soon eclipse even tea itself. A crystal so sweet, so cheap, so demanded. It would enslave millions, poison generations, and remake the human diet more completely than any leaf could. Subscribe for weekly videos on the incredible history of the food and drink that built our world. Next week we uncover sugar, the sweet destroyer, the crystal that turned entire tropical islands into prisons. It turned the human palate into an addiction the modern world has never truly escaped. Hit subscribe, and believe me, if tea changed how you see human history,